Hey y'all, I'm Jamie Flanagan. I'm the owner and operator of Respectful Productions, Spirited Films, respectfully made, a film production company based right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And not only are we trying to make a difference in film, we're trying to make a difference in our communities right next door here in Atlanta.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Joe Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go.
I'm trying to think. It'd be like I have crippling substance abuse problem. I'm kidding, no, but I just get way too deep with y'all. Get into my religious beliefs, politicals.
Trust me, I'm sure that's a can of worms like anybody. You never know what you're gonna get.
Oh, dude! Oh my God, that must be the most exciting part for y'all. Is like, especially if you don't know somebody super well and they come on the show, you never know what you're gonna get. That's exciting.
Oh well, no, we've definitely had like there's one guest in particular I know who is definitely not like a doctrinaire kind of Hollywood liberal, if very much not that. So I was like, when we were doing the interview, I was very careful about like how I phrase my questions. Like,
sure.
Do I want to give this guy an opening to? We're already kind of walking up to the line, but I mean that's just what you do.
Heck yeah, man.
We had there's also a danger of like certain topics coming up. I won't say it because I don't want to get into it, but it's like, yeah, there's plenty. We talked about this before. There's plenty of podcasts that are specifically about Star Wars. We don't need to talk about Star Wars every
100%.
episode,
especially these days, man. It's gotten where like I've just stopped following certain people, like especially when the last series dropped. Like it's like the fandom's like, oh wait, you don't think we can get more toxic? Wait, just like, here we go,
dude. It feels like that in almost every little niche. Everyone people just need to calm down. Everyone's hot. We've been hot for the last like 5-10 years, and we need to cool down.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let me know if that sounded good for y'all. Obviously, I can.
Oh no, that's good. That's good. We had a guest in the past, actually a guy we just interviewed, James Kicklighter, who when I was talking to him at one point, he made a great point of saying like, the internet, most people live here, but the internet lives here. It's always like the angry kind of, edge of whatever,
Yeah, whatever gets you the views. If it gets people to click on it, and if that's extremism or an extreme thought, and it could be anything. There'll be a video about a Snickers bar where people are like, this is worse than genocide. It's like, shut up. Oh my God, you're talking about or it's like, you've ripped my personality. You've ripped my purpose because of what you've done to X, Y, and Z franchise or genre. It's like, bud, we're building the foundation on sand here. If that's what was going to affect our daily life.
So was it this kind of like this just kind of culture of anger that we've got going on now? Is that what kind of inspired you to do like the whole Respectful Productions thing? That
is a great question. And Respectful has definitely evolved, especially with the people who, as we joined in, but Respectful was started in an Upper East Side apartment in New York when I was living up there. That's where the idea started, but the heart of it was born in Atlanta. And it was during the first election. And it was that kind of extremism that we're talking about, where it felt everyone that was around me, regardless of, what their political beliefs were, everybody was intense. There was an intensity that, we're starting to feel a little bit again, but I think we're become numb to it just because of COVID. But there was an intensity there that was, turning friends against each other, people not listening to each other, or even people saying like literally the exact same thing to each other in an argument, but talking past each other because they just had this belief that you were like this and I'm like this. And so when we started Respectful, all right, so we were doing Derek Evans, my business partner, he had his first feature in Atlanta, King of Bloody Britain, King of Bloody effing Britain. You can actually find it on Vudu. I've learned to self-edit. I'm trying to curse less too, incidentally. I curse so much. But anyway, so King of Blood, I know, I know, good, okay, because I can drop some serious ones.
Yeah, you don't have to censor yourself here. Don't worry about it.
Roger that. So we're doing King of Bloody fucking Britain. Derek written, directed it. starring in it. And it was like this first thing that, you know, everyone right out of college was like, oh, wow, look at this guy doing his own thing. We get into the movie, you know, we start doing the movie. We're having a great time, but we kept saying, yo, respect, joking. Like we would say respect to each other. It's something I picked up when I lived in the Bronx, when I was boxing up there. But it would be just like someone would hit you in the boxing ring. You'd be like, okay, respect. Or somebody would get you up, oh, respect. Like it had all these different little ways that you could say it and mean it. But I wanted to open up my own production company, and mainly to do kind of what Derek did, like show people, hey, look, I can act, I can write, I can, you know, lead a team. And it was at that point in the beginning of everyone's career where it was either make your own work or don't work, or work on, you know, a bunch of just keep working on the same things that you don't like. Like I was doing a lot of Discovery ID stuff up there, which is fun, but it wasn't, you know, satisfying. And yeah, so everyone is ripping each other's heads off in New York. It was a little less like that in Georgia at the time, but still, it's like politics. It was like people were just going absolutely to the end of it, of the thermometer, you know, just going fully hot, intense. I was like, yo, what if we just called it Respect? And then Respect, I'm pretty sure production company was already taken by someone I knew. And I met it briefly. I didn't, funnily enough, I won't say what my opinions are on their work, but then I was happy about it because we landed with Respectful Productions, and that became not even so much about what we were making, but how we were going to make it. So anyone, you know, I think people talk a really big game of how they want to run their sets and, you know, being an open and being like a family. But the truth of it is, it comes down to like systems and procedures, and how good can we get those system and procedures so people feel respected when they work for us. Not only that, but when what are we making? Are we making something that is, you know, spreading a good message? Is something nourishing versus like, are we just making another Big Mac of television? Are we making just another, you know, Whopper of a movie? Versus, hey, is this something that's, you know, more of a farm to table experience? So that's, yeah, getting back to it. Yeah, I kind of took a tangent, but Respectful Productions really came about because of people not being respectful. It's like not even having manners. And look, man, we have a right to disagree with each other. We have a right to yell at each other to some extent, I guess, like as friends. But at some point, and he brings this up in Tribe, this is our country. This is our film community. I can't make it without somebody else. And I'm not about to not treat that person with respect based off of my projection of what I think they believe. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, we just want to make movies and make them well and enjoy the experience versus, I think what you see a lot in film is people hating the experience. Mm-hmm. And then I think that passes over to the fan too, where the fan will then hate the experience.
So based on that, so it sounds like you had some experiences early on, and without throwing anybody under the bus, because respect, right? What are some of the things that you wanted to sort of avoid going into creating this? Like, what are some of the things that you were like, hey, man, we don't want to do it that way? Because, you know, I have a friend who is one of the only sets I've ever been on where he's always ahead of schedule. And that is one of the things that I was like, oh, my God, I love working with Harry because he's always ahead of schedule, right?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, 100%. That right there, respecting people's time. So I started in the industry as an actor, and you know, the backbone of film are your crew people, like, you know, people who grips, your PAs, and then your actors. Cause, you know, if you don't have those people there, if you don't have anybody, the movie's not getting made. But one of the worst feelings is, working up in a place in New York or LA or on a massive film set where, you know, supposedly these are the people who have made it. They got it licked. They got it figured out. And then you're waiting. You end up having like a 14-hour day, and you're kind of confused as to why that happened. And as an actor, you're not always there seeing it. But then as I was sort of working more and more on set when I was younger, seeing just lack of planning and lack of preparation at all. And it came off to us, even though obviously I understand it wasn't meant to this, it was extremely disrespectful. Now, yeah, I get it. You're paying me. I get it. You're going to pay me overtime. No one asked me if I wanted to work overtime. I like how it was just assumed. Now, sometimes they get us to sign the contracts where it's like, hey, we have you for this amount of time. You get the guaranteed overtime. That's fantastic. But when you could have had people get home to their families on time, but you just didn't have a shot list. And that this happens even with movies that have millions of dollars of budget. You'll have directors or DPs or whoever just not do their work and not do their prep. So that was something that I knew, if, hey, we're paying for people's time, we have to be extremely respectful of that. And what does that look like? That looks like us doing our job as best as we can, fulfilling the mission of our, fulfilling the responsibilities of our job before we even get on set. Because if you're working, like if I as a director, if I as a first AD, I'm already on day one starting to organize, like we're done. We're going to go overtime. We're going to lose the shoot. And it looks like I didn't do my job. It's disrespectful versus I like, you get a grip who's like not doing their job or smoking a cigarette, and some executive producer comes over and rips their head off. It's like, well, pal, you didn't do your job to begin with. So number one, that. And then I had experiences where I saw first ADs and producers put their hands on actors and extras in filming and TV shows, feature films. And that, of course, those people got called out and reported, but in the moment they didn't. There was a serious sense of fear of, if I call out this first AD who I literally just saw grab an actor to put them on a mark, treating them like a prop, people, there's this sense of fear that I can't speak up. And right there in that moment, when I had that experience, I was like, oh no, I need to develop a set where people feel comfortable telling me, Flanagan, even though if I might be the one paying them, Flanagan, you're not doing X, Y, and Z because of this standard that we've created and we agreed to as a company and as a team. So yeah, just seeing people being treated like props,
like cattle.
Well, 100%. That's like, I mean, look, and there's nothing new, man. That's like, what's his name? Oh my gosh, Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh yeah, it's one of his famous quotes about like how you're supposed to treat actors. I mean, there's tons of that out there. Even like my brother does a lot of like extra and stand-in work here, and I'm not going to name any specific stuff because I don't want to call anybody out unduly. But he's told me so many stories about how, like, where he's worked on a TV show, and like you said, you're doing like a 14 to 16 hour day because someone may not know exactly what they want out of this scene. And then plus too, like depending on the shows, like you get like medical dramas or legal dramas, and you've got like a really full set and you're managing so many people, and it's kind of like this accepted level of chaos. And I feel like you add on top of that, just this kind of, there's this weirdly, I think it's becoming less romantic in the last few years, especially when you talk like this movement of people just seeing like how toxic things have gotten, especially like on sets. There's just like, oh, movies are just chaos, and it'll all come together. But I think it also, as you're saying, and I'm sure we've all heard people with stories where you go on a set where it's just it starts to feel like people are giving themselves a license to behave badly because it's like, oh, I just got to get in there and work it out. It's like, well, no, maybe if you had been a little more organized coming into this process, we wouldn't be having to do this now. It sounds like that I guess that mentality or that way of doing things is kind of what you're, you've planted your flag out there. Now you're going into battle against that kind of, I don't know what you would call that, what kind of culture, or just, Yeah.
It's so funny. At a base level, it's fear. Because, what does Hollywood, the big Hollywood films have that our independent company Respectful doesn't have? It's a money hose. They can spray away their problems. Well, a lot of times you'll have independent film companies who might think, oh, well, it will come together. Well, it comes together on the back of somebody else or because of a lot of money. So a lot of times you'll see a lot of movies just go into utter chaos, and then it's the editor picking up the pieces, trying to figure it out. A lot of times it's the first AD trying to just keep everything, or the director trying to keep everything moving. But in that chaos, what I really see is a lack of vision. What we're talking about here is like, if it can be thought of, it can be filmed. Well, think of it a lot before you ever attempt to film it, and then write out exactly how you're going to do it, because that's basically just you flexing your vision. and the vision can change on the day. And I'm not saying, by the way, that like, mistakes are going to happen. Like you say, legal problems can pop up or medical issues, someone gets sick and that pushes your day. But those are like, forced mistakes versus a vision mistake. It's like if you didn't know what it was going to look like the day of filming, then you can't shoot it. So a lot of it is also how much of this can we really, how much of the film can we really watch in our head before we go out and try to make it. And again, like then communicating that to other people. But I think there's a fear of, oh, I can't actually envision this. And I think when you have that moment of, oh, wait, I can't actually envision this, I think that's where you go, we'll deal with it on the day. And then that's when dealing with it on the day is going to cost you a lot of money and time and respect as well,
It seems like because I'm thinking about all the moving pieces that happen in film. And I think being a voice actor and having other voice actors ask us, like, why are we always being asked to do last minute auditions? And I'm like, it's just a function of where we are in the food chain and how it's not even disorganization. There's always someone at the top who has to give approval, who hasn't given approval, or who last minute swoops in and changes something. And I think the same thing happens on film sets where all of a sudden you have multiple different producers on set or nearby, and they're really calling the shots because it's their money. And they're like, and maybe one has artistic control, but not money control. Another one has money control. And then all of a sudden you have people going, we need to change the scene now. We need to do this. But you already have people booked. You already have sets reserved. You've gotten the location. So unless you have a lot of money to throw at that, there's going to be some squeeze somewhere, like you said. And so do you see that, like with independent productions, it has its own challenges, but there is more flexibility than in that way?
That's a great question. It forces you to be flexible. So a lot of times, the more money I have, the more choices I can make in some ways. So, because if you were to tell me, hey, here's $5 million for your next action film, I go, okay, cool. Like now I can really make that sequence. I can get the explosions. But if you say, hey, you only have $300,000 for this, I'm going to say, well, I can still make it 100%. It's just going to be different, look different, be shot differently, all these things. So a lot of times I would say that your choices are made for you. And it's definitely, it does call for more different types of sacrifice. Cause I think almost every type of art is a type of warfare. And, I'm directing a documentary about a veteran who fought in Kunar province, Afghanistan, Gary Hool. And so Gary's like a proper warrior. He fights in armored combat, and now he's also a painter. And he just like started painting and drawing and sculpting and all this stuff. He went to art school like last 2 years. It's incredible. But one of the things I notice is how even in something like that, it calls for sacrifice, just like in a war. Now in film, sometimes the sacrifice is, with independent film, it could be, hey, we don't have enough money to go get that shot. Okay, then the battle plan needs to be, think of the movie. Okay, I think of the edit. All right, this is how we can get those shots. We can, cheat it. Now, but if it's a lot of money, I have a completely different battle of a personality battle. If I have 4 EPs or 4 financiers who all want to be a different, filter in the edit of the film, that's a completely different battle. Like in some ways, I'd rather not have the money and just try to figure out how to make the movie and at least have the control to make the mistake versus 5 different directors basically who get a say because it's their money. Now, there's still a way to lead that and still a way to figure that out. And I think that's the best part of independent film is there's less voices and less control. Sorry, more control, less voices, but there's less money. The reverse, when you get bigger money and bigger budgets,
Well, it's
but
not, and so I would say, well, it's not just the war; it's the diplomacy. It's one thing to win the war; it's another thing to win the peace, right?
oh man, to get everybody to agree on something. Here's the thing. Look, if I showed you guys a movie right now, all of y'all would have different points. Like we've gotten feedback on movies where it's, oh, I love the music. I hate the music. This lead is polarizing. This lead is amazing. At some point, you just have to trust yourself and trust the chef. And so that's something else too, is building that level of trust in a film is not easy. It takes probably multiple projects to build, but you got to trust your cook. Like, so if I go into a Michelin star restaurant and I'm paying $500 for this steak, I need to trust that chef. But another thing that a Michelin chef is not going to allow the customer to come in and say, well, no, you need to cook the steak this way, this way, this way. It's like, well, man, look, you trusted me to walk through the door. You trusted me to sit down at the table. You got to trust us to come out with the food you want. And I think it's the kind of the same for film, that I think a lot of the big studios fail on is they don't actually trust their people. And then they end up going and get notes from everybody. And what you get is a Frankenstein of a movie that is a shade off of what it could have been. It just feels like it feels like, oh, you missed the punch by an inch. There's just there's not enough salt in some of these.
Well, you see it in so many, like even like really, well, a lot of big movies, a lot of the big franchises, like over the years, like you've seen this thing where on one hand they want to hire like certain ex big director because they have a style or something that they're after. And then you kind of like almost in the next breath, it's like you kind of feel like they're starting to kind of hamstring them a little bit, where it's like, okay, we want you to do this thing, but we want you to do it our way. So now you see, and sometimes the director can pull it off. And then other times you can kind of say, well, yeah, that you can tell that the studio kind of, messed with the soup a little too much. And now it comes out not what it could be.
100%. And, back to Hitchcock, to throw him because he's such an interesting character, but to throw him a bone, how he dealt with producers, he would literally cut his film into puzzle pieces. And so when the execs would be like, hey, Alfred, show us your movie, he would give him a box of a bunch of puzzle pieces of film. So here you go, figure it out, bro, because that's exactly right. You're hiring a guy specifically for his flavor. You're hiring a director, a production designer, a writer for their flavor that they're relished by. And the audience wants to go see that artist. They want to see that style. And then they're only given 5% of it, a dose of it. It's just, then it rubs people the wrong way as well. And it brings a little less, it breaks trust with the audience as well, because there's an expectation set up. If we're going to hire, I'm pulling something out of my head, but like if we hire, Guy Ritchie to do, a Batman film, like I would expect it to look like Guy Ritchie directed it, not necessarily like Guy Ritchie's take on a Nolan Batman,
It seems like there's an inverse curve going on. Like the more clout you get in the industry and the more voice you find, the more you're fighting the money and people watering down your thing. And then if you can get past that curve that's coming from both ways, then all of a sudden you're David Lynch and you're Guy Ritchie and whatever.
Or Christopher Nolan or
right, where people start trusting you again because you've made enough money for them so yeah, it's just interesting, like getting past that pressure point here in the middle where you have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, and getting past it, is very. It doesn't make any sense that you would, for example, you're right. Everything you just said is correct, but it also doesn't make sense to me that there's this period where, hey, we're going to water down with what we know makes money, because I also feel that, and maybe I'm wrong, I haven't taken the time to really dive into the numbers of it, but I wouldn't say that watering down films has been helping at all, or the reboots are particularly successful. And if it's it feels like lowest common denominator filming and movies aren't working anyway. So yeah, make the director come up with something spicy. I don't, like take that kind of chance is what I would like them to do, versus, hey, let's get you to see if you play ball for 5 more movies, and then maybe if people still like you after we've wrecked everything you've done. I don't know if that's always the case.
Well, it's also like, look at the biggest movies in the last few years was like Barbie and Oppenheimer, right? And it was 2 wildly different movies, but it was in both instances, it was a filmmaker said, like, I'm going to do my thing and you get on board or don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say to Jamie's point too, but isn't it really, the problem isn't necessarily that one person is trying to water down. Like, if you were just dealing with one producer or maybe even 2, then, it's like you can, and if those producers were like, hey, I just have an opinion and it's okay, you can take it or not, but this is my opinion. But it seems like you have a tug of war going on with all these people pulling it in all these different directions, and that's how it gets watered down. And, how do you deal with that? I have a friend, acquaintance from back home who dealt with that a lot. He had a treatment of a script. He kept redoing it. Every time he had new people wanting to invest, it was like, oh, but we think this scene. But if you just do it this, if you can bring the budget down. And I was just like, I don't know how you deal with that. That's a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we definitely deal with that too. So on a lot of our documentaries, so with Steel Soldier, in the conversations we've had with that, we've heard everything from, and talking to different people, lower the budget. This budget needs to be way bigger. No one's going to take you seriously if this budget isn't, X, Y, and Z. Hey, no one's going to take you seriously if the budget's this much. Who's correct?
I was going to ask you with that, because I saw because you do both documentaries and kind of dramatic, and the more the narrative kind of movies. Is it better or worse, or is it roughly just kind of end up being the same depending on, whatever you're trying to do?
You probably feel it the same, but it's worse for a documentary, because especially if you love the people you're doing the doc about, and it's not like a true crime thing. Well, number one, like true crime docs, like if you could take a documentary, if you brought me a doc, it was like, oh, this great doc about how my grandmother survived World War II. I feel like studios would be like, oh, that's great. Where's the true crime angle? Was she like hiding gold or something? It's like, well, no, is that no. But I think some of the biggest things is like people in a documentary will say, oh my gosh, love this. And what if X, Y, and Z happened in the documentary? And what if it took this turn? Like, well, it can't. Because of this person's life is in control over that one way or the other. And then with documentaries too, there's the same added aspect of, oh, like you should be able to do this for this amount of money and make it look this way. But the truth is, you can make any movie for any amount of budget. It will just affect how that movie's, digested. It mediums the message in that way. But yeah, I would probably say I would rather somebody try to take over like a feature script that I wrote versus a documentary, because I get very protective over the people we do the documentaries about, like especially with Gary. Like I met him right before COVID, and it's not just like we're a fly on the wall anymore in this guy's life. We're like allies. We're friends, trying to put the word out for what he's doing. And if somebody came in and was like, hey, great story, here's how we're going to change it, I'd be like, I just can't with the doc,
Well, yeah, because you also had that kind of that journalistic thing too, where it's like, on one hand, you've got to sell it to people, but at the same time, you want to be truthful and kind of faithful to, your subject matter, or the subject of the movie. In this case, like your friend. I mean, like I had a similar thing, like, because it's like I did like a little short doc about a painter, but it took me like months to get this guy to even just let me into the door and kind of like say, oh, okay, now I'm ready you trust me enough to come let me in your space and film you. And so you have to kind of, like, that's the thing I think people don't see on that side. Like you kind of have to you really have to kind of like go build a relationship with those people to kind of come let you in and do that thing. And now it's not just, okay, here are these actors, these people that I hired to come to read a script or do whatever. It's like, now if you mess with it too much, now you're betraying the faith of the people that you had to go work with to do the doc.
100%. That's a great point, Brandon. And I didn't realize, we knew at the get. So my father's a Marine. So part of me was like, oh, I wonder if Gary and I might get along, just because I understand like that type of relationship or whatever. But it, not only did it take a long time to earn trust for both of us, because he had to earn trust with me, because what if he didn't show up one day? What if there'd be days he'd show up and he would have to be like, hey, I'm not mentally ready to talk to you. And that was a great opportunity for us to build trust and say, okay, you're not ready. All right, then we're not going to do it. Like that was something we were very strong about, is not pushing anybody into a conversation they're not ready for. And then, to then be able to get on the same mission took time. What is that mission going to be? Because I told him up front, hey, Steel Soldier's about, we want stopping veteran suicide, stopping suicide, period. And basically trying to save as many people we can from. He's like, okay, I'm on board for that. And I was like, all right, now you being on board for that means you're going to have to tell me, or you have to be comfortable talking about stories in Afghanistan, firefights. Are you okay with that? Yes. You okay about talking about friends who committed suicide to a degree? Are you okay talking about homelessness, drug abuse, all this? Maybe. It's like, okay. So we kind of found the lay of the land, where I could push, where I couldn't. And it took time to build that. But that is 100% the hardest part, because they don't know what to expect. They're not actors. And there's a camera. Dude, that is so intense. Like think of the most traumatic thing you've ever been through. Now, I'm coming into your house with 6 people that you've never met with an ingenue lens that's the size of my arm. And it's so hard. I am constantly humbled and impressed by what Gary, his family, and the other people in Steel Soldier that we've interviewed have done, because they're going at it because they've joined on to the mission. And to talk about these difficult things is to fight for this mission. But we're still filming it, so obviously it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the whole respectful angle. And do you find that with that stuff, it's just better to just kind of be transparent about your motives? Like you said, you went to this guy and said, we're the ultimate goal is to kind of address, veteran suicide. And then because we've had people talk about that kind of aspect of filming, I guess the political side of it, having to kind of win people to your cause. And maybe sometimes you might have to, it's like on the fictional side, we had one of our guests talking about how sometimes I think she initially was talking about okay, it was maybe you're lying to people, but no, it's really just kind of saying, no, I have to, and getting over that hump where you kind of know how to work the politics of filmmaking, but do it in a way that is being kind of open and honest. Look, I would love to have you in this, or I would love to do X, Y, and Z, but either for money reasons or whatever, we can't do that. So this is how it's all going to work. These are the goals. And you just lay out everything on the table that way. No one feels like they're being cajoled or, manipulated. It seems like you've adopted that approach. Is that kind of is that where the respectful angle comes in? Start doing the docs, you just, when you go into something, you say, hey, here's what we're doing. Are you on board with this?
100%. Yeah. You have to have your hierarchy of values put in place. And we value Gary and his well-being above our film. And so going into that with that mindset of, hey, we value Gary more than our film, that means any decision we make is going to put him before the film. All right, then that means not only do I tell him that, I have to give him the ability to control the film to a degree. Now, Gary doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the footage. He doesn't have my computer or anything, but Gary has the keys to the car. And if I say, hey, tell me about that night, this happened, and it's something he brought up, and he looks at me, he goes, no, I'm not going there. I don't push back at all. Some people disagree with me. There's plenty of documentarians like, now look, if I was interviewing Saddam Hussein, yeah, I might push back on him. But I'm not I'm not trying to do a gotcha moment. I'm trying to understand somebody. And so, those are the, basically those are the intentions of the question of, hey, I need to hear the story because people need to understand what you went through. And I don't want to obviously tell too much of his story, but there's, one thing he spoke to us about, the shame he felt coming back home. Like that's something that not a lot of civilians understand, but he felt like it was wrong being back here with his family versus back in Afghanistan. So I had to tell, hey, tell me that story one more time. And he was ready to tell that story about it, and he brought it up. And so that's another thing, is just making sure that he knows, hey, not only do you have the keys to the car, but I've proven to him that if he says no, we're not walking to there. And, one of the biggest guiding lights is, and for anybody listening, please go look this up. You guys have to look this up. But Ken Burns did a fantastic masterclass on documentary filmmaking. And he's talking about the specific edit he did with a World War II veteran, and how the interview's not going well. The guy was boring, basically. All of his stuff was memorized. But then he refers to this one guy as a kid. He goes, yeah, this one kid showed up. He goes, well, Ken Burns says, wait a minute. You're saying this one replacement was a kid. How old were you, Paul? He goes, well, I was 19. He goes, but this other guy was a kid? He goes, yeah, well, you must have seen a lot, Paul. He goes, I did see a lot. What did you see? And then Ken Burns starts going, well, this movie starts playing in his head. And Paul tells him the story. And it's this terrible story, war in World War II. But Ken Burns goes, wow, look at that. That was gold. He gave me gold and all this stuff. And he goes on saying how great the interview was. And then Ken Burns pauses. And he goes, wait, before we cut, can I say something? How terribly disrespectful it was for me to just call Paul's interview, what he just said, as gold. As if I'm some sort of, I think he described him, he said, as if I'm some sort of person trying to rape gold out of an interview, take his trauma and turn it into something good. And that's not what I'm about. I'm about reciprocity. And so Ken Burns goes into this whole, he critiques himself. He checks himself, which, by the way, I love that in a leader. I love seeing that someone can check themselves. But then he says, well, this is the point of documentary filmmaking, is that Paul got something out of that interview. Gary gets something out of this confessional that I'm doing it right now. Just being interviewed by y'all is making me talk about things I don't talk about normally, but the camera just brings it out. And it has almost this sort of confessional aspect. I'm Roman Catholic, and we have confession. And a lot of people say, you don't need confession to get forgiveness of God. 100%. I don't think you need it, but you get something cathartic when you tell people about things you're ashamed of, and it's witnessed and it's listened to. It's validated to a degree. Now, I don't like some of the things that I hear in these interviews, but when it gets off this person's chest, it becomes there's a reciprocity. We give each other a little bit of our souls to help other people see, here's an example of a person who didn't kill themselves. That's powerful. That's what we're trying to go for, but you don't get that without that respect, to answer your question in the long way.
Well, it seems like, part of it is the motivation behind it, right? If your motivation is purely, I want to make this documentary and it's going to be awesome and it's going to be salacious and it's going to make money, then maybe it is a little but in your case, it's you have your mission behind it is such a noble mission that it's yeah, if you make money off of it, great. But the mission is to help prevent this in the future. Our mission in this podcast, obviously we're not making any money right now. Our mission in this podcast is to share stories of creatives who have struggled and who are trying to make their own thing or have made their own thing and helped other people, and to inspire others who haven't made their thing yet. And so it's a little bit of the motivation behind it, but also I don't think there's anything wrong with having the motivation to make money off of something.
Oh no, totally.
But it just but it does kind of get a little muddy when it's something like what you're talking about with that, like, oh, this is going to be great.
Oh
right?
yeah. Well, if you start talking about like, all right, well, here's a great example. So we're filming up in Salem. So I'll give you a little bit of the story. Gary's building a group of veterans to fight in the sport called armored combat. Most of these guys, if they didn't deal with suicide, they have a direct friend who has, or something like that. But basically, Steel Legion was invited to go to this Comic-Con type event called Kick-Ass, Knights and Castles, I think it was. And we had a new guy with us, a new filmmaker who was filming with us, not new to film, but just new to the team. And I was saying, okay, go. So like, here's some of the rules, by the way. And I forgot I had to talk to him. I was like, oh yeah, by the way, this isn't like, like trauma porn. So 100%, if we're in an interview, someone's crying, that's okay. They're allowed to cry. Sometimes we need people to see us cry. It's a good thing to see people cry, especially some of these men and women who are like, the stereotype of these types of people don't cry. It's like, not only do they cry, but it's incredibly invigorating and, makes you build strength. So, but I was like, but if someone says, turn off the camera, we're turning it off. Okay. And like, we turn away from the camera. Like, I really, this is the last thing I would ever want in my documentary is for you to turn off the camera. And then we kept it rolling. Like, that just feels so disrespectful. Like, every time I see that in a movie. But he goes, oh, I'm glad you said that, because the last doc I was on, he had orders to get the woman to cry. Get her to cry. Like, make sure you bring up this and try to ask it in this way so she cries. And I just, okay, like I get the excuse. The excuse is going to be, but look, we need the audience to understand how important this is to her. But that's just so like point and click. Like, that's just,
lazy?
What's the word I'm looking for? Exploitative, objectifying. It just feels like this woman is like a type of machine that if you press in the right way, she's going to deliver the goods for camera, the gold, as Ken Burns accidentally put it,
And
it sounds like when you get people like, I'm sorry to, and not to try and get too political, but when you hear people talk about like capitalism at its ideal versus how it tends to play out in real life, at its ideal, we both get something out of whatever transaction we're doing. If I give you the money and you give me whatever goods and we both come away happy, versus, how it can be some, oftentimes or many times in real life where it's one side is taking advantage of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exploit 100%. Dude, you see that in so many things, where we see that in romantic relationships because of this exact type of thing, where this for that. And even a type of quid pro quo. Like, I don't even think you can go into it with quid pro quo. You like idea of, well, Gary's going to tell us this, and because he gave us this, we're going to give him that. Like, even that isn't correct as much as, hey, like, this is a sacred bond that we are creating here. This is actually sacred. And I think it's difficult to exploit something or someone where you believe it's sacred. It's going to be hard for you to exploit the environment if you believe it's sacred. It's going to be hard for you to exploit your kids or your spouse or whatever if you believe that person's sacred. And so, like, if you have that notion of this is sacred, but like you're gonna handle it carefully. Like, I'm gonna go back to like a religious metaphor, but I think it's the Levites, or was it the Levites? Forget who, but whoever carries the Ark of the Covenant. That's how I feel like our position at filmmakers, as these filmmakers are, is, hey, like, it's our job to just carry the Ark of the Covenant here and to bring it around and to show people. But don't touch it, because if you touch it, you might die. And, but by that message, I mean, like, don't try to corrupt it or get too involved in it, but also know that it's not something that's meant to just purely make money. Now, look, I'll be very upfront. I would love if Steel Soldier made money, but if Steel Soldier makes money, Gary's going to make money as well. So you also have to be blunt about it and honest, and not just act like, yo, I'm doing this just because of the mission. Now, if this movie doesn't make money, I don't care, but I want it to, because I want people to see it. I want it to be successful. And then Gary will also benefit from that, and the team will benefit from that. But you you can't say, hey, I want to make money, therefore I'm going out to make a movie about PTSD, if that makes any sense. There's a nuance there.
No.
And I'm very interested about the ethic of it, because we have all these ethical conversations in documentary all the time, because just the way we edit people can change what they meant to say or their personality. So there's a lot of ethical things that go on with it. But, this last documentary we just did is a great example of it. Under the African Sun was directed by my partner, Derek. It's about his father and his father's partner, who have a mission called Quench Ministries. They dig boreholes in Zimbabwe, Philippines, Mongolia, in rural areas, bringing water to people who don't have it. Well, we sold that documentary recently to Rivers Our Life. And one of those things, man, is a very interesting ethical question. We're going over to a place now, we're going over to a place that's has a lot of suffering, but also a lot of happiness. And we've all seen those documentaries from the 90s or the commercials where we're filming a person in poverty, and there's a voice of donate now to save this child. So, look, we can all agree we want to help people, but the way that they filmed it was exploitative and was wrong, and also was an incorrect perception of what was actually going on. So one of the things filming Under the African Sun that was very important to Derek was, this is a beautiful place. It's a joyous place, and the people are full of joy. Go in and show that. Show the joy, show that, and then, show the suffering. Walking miles for water sucks. But they find joy in that as well. There's problems. Doesn't mean that you have to make it worse than it actually is either. It's bad enough. You don't have to go in and try to make the area look gross or bad. It's when it's not. It's joyous, strong people that even when they're hungry are singing, are working. The amount of mothers that have babies on their strapped onto their backs, and so that means as filmmakers, we have a responsibility to them to show what their lives are actually like, not to try to project the image of what we think you want to see as an audience in America. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. It's you don't, I want to say you don't need to go to the lily, but it's really, you don't need to muck up the dung heap, right? So
yeah,
you don't need to layer on the suffering.
100%.
I want to go tangential here because we talked a lot about the work and kind of your philosophy, but I really want to know too a little bit, because I don't know you that well. We met once in person. Was there a point between college and now that you were am I going to be able to make a go of this? Am I just going to have to work for someone else forever? How did you progress from along that, and how did you get out of that mentality or get to do your own thing?
Yes. The short answer is, right out of college, I went to the Strasberg School, which was awesome. I think we had met through Shannon Morrill, who's another filmmaker. So I met her at Fordham, right? And man, I tell you, there were many times where I didn't know if I was going to, make it or not, because of the definition of what that really meant. And I think a lot of people that I was around in New York at the time, making it was very specific. It was making it, living in New York. So you had to part of living in New York was part of making it. Basically getting to do whatever you want was making it. So I can show up for work or not show up for work, because there's this image of actors, as especially celebrities, as these forces of energy that were just bouncing from gig to gig, and in their nice coats. I don't know why, but that was my image of actors in New York, was just these are the most well-dressed human beings that are just floating from performance to performance. In reality, it was the real work of an actor was very humbling and was not at all exciting in the way of extrovert. It was when you maybe got on stage, but a lot of the work of the actor is very solemn, alone, lonely work where your own worst enemy is in your head. And you start getting this voice of, will I make it? Will I make it? Well, first off, fuck that. I think it's a fucking irrelevant question, because who has got to define make it? All right. So then I go, all right, well, I'm suffering in New York, and it was really Derek who got me kind of out of it, which was, I'm not going to be able to make it. Like, no one's going to choose me, and I'm not going to make it if someone chooses me. So I need to go and make my own stuff. So we started with the Respectful sketch comedy series. And through that, like, I came from like a valley. There was a while where I was like, oh, we're going to be millionaires, dog. Like, we are this close from getting picked up from Comedy Central or Adult Swim or whoever. And maybe we were, like, who knows? Like, you'll never know. But then, like, it from then on, there wasn't ever a thought of, so maybe when I hit about like 28, I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, but I was committed one way or the other. And what I mean by that, I was committed to making it was, however that looked, I wasn't going to walk away from the film industry unless I said to myself, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. Because I truly, like, if I was ordered not to be here, I wouldn't be here. Like, if my heart told me, hey, like, this isn't actually it, I would have left a long time ago.
Is it really just defining success on your own terms?
100%. Because if you're feeding your family and you're working in film, you've won. Like, if you're making, if you're making 50 grand plus a year in film, I think you've won. Now, because think how much it costs to even get into like the directors union. It's like thousands of dollars. It might be like double figures. So if you're a working crew person, but here's another thing. So you can't ever define success by how much you're working, because I know people who are the best of their business who aren't working at all right now, because there's no work or there's no strike. So did they not make it because they're not working? Or I say, no, they made it. They're just not working because of the way the industry is. So you have to define success on your own 100%. Now look, but let's get real. But like, financially, there's going to be people who say, well, yeah, but are you making enough financially to keep you in the industry? It's like, yeah, but you got to be ready to hunt. It's a fisher hunting type situation. And you got to have to constantly look for your work / constantly create it. Because, even if you sell a movie, that's only giving you a couple of years worth of work max. So you have to sell a lot of movies at any given time. So you have to be okay with, if you don't want to do that, like having side jobs. But for me, that's success. Like, one of my side gigs is as a tour guide here. And if I'm not working a lot in film, I'll jump over to that. And if that's going to hurt your ego to tell people, oh, I work in movies, but I also do that. Well, it's like, all right, that's fine. But no one unless, I'll say this, very few people are constantly working on a film unless you're the one owning it or writing it, and even then you got to be owning and writing a lot of them at any given time. So definitely define success, but like, and also enjoy your work. Dude, the amount of people, how many times have you gone to set and it's just been a massive ball of anxiety and people are like, I cannot wait for this day to be over. That's not worth it. So like, if you're making money doing that, in my opinion, it's not worth it. Like, I don't think that, for me, that's not making it. That's not success in my eyes. Like, success for me would be, I'm happy every day I'm on set. Of course, there's going to be shit days, whatever. And I'm providing for my family, doing with what I love, and you can do that in so many different ways. But I think we got maybe a little brainwashed, at least I did in college, that if I wasn't in New York making money as an actor, I was nothing. And that's total bullshit. And that Derek was the one who got me to see that in Atlanta was the place for me to be, because we could actually create stuff, at least for here. Now, there's people in New York doing that too, but there's people in Cleveland. There's people in New Orleans. You don't have to be anywhere to start doing this. You could be right where you are.
Well, and the benefit of being here So I've heard from my fellow roommates who moved from New York, is it's cheaper to exist. So then you're not hustling as hard just to have the mere existence.
Oh, yeah.
You can hustle hard. You're going to have to hustle hard, but you won't hustle hard just to exist. You'll hustle hard to thrive.
Yeah. And like, we would have never been able to make Under the African Sun if our company was based in New York. It just period. To be able to like own and store the gear, the talent that's here, that's the talent here is so crazily untapped. It's ridiculous. And that's another thing is I think on top of that is we don't need to be needy as creatives. I think there are ways, and there's going to be more ways to make money outside of the typical studio system and outside of the typical distribution system, especially when those distributors start realizing that, companies like Respectful Productions, other people in Atlanta, Wax and Wayne, who can make any movie that they have and want to make on their roster, any script we can make here. Like, we have everything, like, pretty much without leaving the state of Georgia, we can make it here,
Yeah.
Someone pointed out, like, because I'm someone who likes to go check out different restaurants and stuff, but I think it's only very, very recently that people have been kind of starting to notice, like, Atlanta, like, it's a food town. And someone pointed out that, and it's, for people who have traveled, said, like, yeah, I think that part of how that came about, like you said, with like with the actors in the movie industry, people coming down here because like the price of doing something like that, like in LA or New York, is just, it's so high that it's a threshold that a lot of people can't meet. Whereas they come here and it's like, okay, now the cost of just existing and just kind of, being able to live somewhere is so much less that now it kind of offers people like a little more room to grow and to flourish. And it sounds like, I mean, like, there's also, like, too, as we all know, like down in Atlanta, there's so many people. Well, Atlanta's famous for just we're having what we call transplants anyway, but it went beyond the business world is how it was for a long time. And now it's like, it filtered out into like the movie industry, where you got people down here from DC, from Baltimore, or from Chicago, New York, LA, like, you start catching all these other people, and it kind of starts to create this like ecosystem where now people are like, oh, I'm not having to spend like $3,000 a month to live in someone's closet, Yeah. Now I can go take that, I can maybe spend half of that to go out with a few roommates, and now I've got money to go maybe pour into like a short film or some acting classes, or, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. And logistics too. Oh my gosh, visiting your friends is a pain in the ass in New York. Imagine doing a full feature film. Like, it's difficult. And to be able, and we're already in an industry where you need side gigs, that especially to get you over the hump, to kind of, you're going to have to drive places. Now in New York, it takes an hour sometimes to get to your side gig just on the subway, and it's not dependable. But the one thing you can say about Atlanta traffic is dependably bad. So I could actually know like when I'm going to be, how late I'm going to be, or when I'm going to be. But like, for me, the logistics freed up so much of my life to where it was easier getting to my side jobs. It took less time getting to my side jobs because of not needing to rely on the public transportation. I would love if it was better here too, but just being able to like that right there, like you said, cheaper, less stressed. When you're less stressed, you're more creative, in my opinion, 100%. I think sometimes stress is good to kind of get like, kind of have like an iron on your back, so to speak, not iron your back, like, kind of have like a whip on your back, so to speak. It kind of gives you a little bit of energy, like, oh, I got to get this done. But if you're writing and you're creating, usually people don't do well under stress, at least for me. But that made a big difference. And also culture. There is a big culture difference between Atlanta and New York for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is I legit think neighborly, people are more neighborly here, generally speaking, because it's more spread out. I think that, a basic having more rural areas has that somewhat culture effect. But then you had people join the film industry that were electricians that were grips that were coming in that had nothing to do with film until the industry came down here. And that had an immediate culture shift on our industry that was so that kind of got more of like a worker mentality in our industry versus more of like a celebrity vibe that I feel like it had in New York. Like I definitely feel down here more of a, maybe it's just my perception or perspective on it, but more of a team attitude, you know, more of just like a, oh yeah, we're all workers here, regardless of the position. Everyone's, you know, we're all laborers on the same team, you know, mentality, which I dig.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're coming up on the hour. So where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, well, so we're on Instagram. You can find us at our website, respectfulproductions.com. We've actually just updated it, so we'll be adding any more new films that we're adding to our roster, anything like that. Any films that are already out, you can find there. We got King of Bloody fucking Britain on Vudu. We have Night Shoot, directed by Taylor Katsanos, another local amazing filmmaker here in town, on there as well. And Under African Sun, you can find on our website or go to YouTube. Or Rivers Are Life is a great organization that's making fantastic movies about heroes that are saving our environment one river at a time. But yeah, y'all, we got our YouTube as well at Respectful Productions too. So yeah, I think that's all the places you can find us. And man, we're here in Atlanta, so you guys want to make a movie, you got a great script that you want to make, hit us up. Spirited Films, respectfully made, you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jamie.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate y'all having it hit me up, and we got it done almost immediately. Thank you guys.
Hey, it's like it was meant to be.
Hell yeah.
Thanks, man. It was awesome.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll talk to you guys soon.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on social media at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. To learn more about the show, visit scratchclawpush.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2024 by Carcutta Media, LLC, all rights reserved.